Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. Tuesday's severe storms brought power outages and debris to clean up around our area. But for one Chapel Hill condo community, it also brought several inches of floodwaters into their homes. And it isn't the first time this has happened. Joining us to talk about it is WRAL Durham reporter Monica Casey. Monica, I know you've been covering this since Tuesday evening, so thank you for taking the time with us.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start by talking more broadly about what you saw out in the field on Tuesday. It was pretty chaotic in the afternoon and evening.
Morgan, today is a WRAL weather alert day, and for good reason. WRAL's Monica Casey joins us now live on West Club Boulevard.
What were you seeing in Durham and the western part of our area?
We saw a lot of basically heavy rain and wind.
It's been raining steadily in Durham really all day today. We're seeing things pick up right now.
What we were also seeing a ton of ponding on the road.
Hear the water rushing as people are driving by, and it's quite deep right here by the curb.
And that situation where you have cars kicking up tons of water to the car in the next lane. So driving was a little hairy in some parts of the western part of our viewing area.
Yeah, and when I was getting ready for this podcast, I was thinking that some of our viewers and listeners might be kind of curious about how this kind of coverage works. So take us a little bit behind the scenes. How do you, as a reporter in the field, figure out what places to check out when severe weather's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tuesday, I was working the night side 3 to 11 o'clock shift because we knew that weather was going to be coming in those afternoon hours, and we'd have possibly damage to cover into the evening. So a few other reporters and I shifted our shifts to work a bit later in that way. I would say kind of our brain center sort of is our assignment desk, where they are listening to scanners, they are checking different emergency communications, and we are in constant contact with the men and women on that desk. They are getting to all of our different reporters. Sometimes we're getting phone calls from them about damage. We also always make sure to be monitoring the Duke Energy outage app. When we do severe weather coverage, usually the videographer that we're with is driving, and that way I'm able to be in the passenger seat. Vinny, my photographer, can focus on the road while I can focus on communicating with Kara and Jamila about what's happening and also watching that outage map. When we see outages of, 1,600 people, that was one of the ones yesterday popping up, we make sure to go to that area, see if we can find where that damage might be to the power lines. One of the plus sides of living and working in Durham is I also know where some of those creeks and rivers are, where the water gets high. So we knew to check out some of those areas as things were going on.
Right. And I appreciate the shout out you gave to our assignment desk folks. For our listeners, they really are such a big help to us here and a big part of our team. So how did you eventually end up going to these condos in Chapel Hill?
This is one that I really want to highlight because it's so helpful. We had a couple of different viewers reach out to us about this, and that's incredibly helpful for us to hear from you all about what's happening because we don't have eyes everywhere. Vinny and I were based in Durham. We were ready to go over to Orange County and Chapel Hill, and we had a couple of people from this apartment condo complex reach out to us about this flooding issue. So that email and those calls that they made were to the assignment desk that we mentioned. We got a few of those, and the desk kind of worked with our managers and decided Vinny and I would leave Durham and head over to these condos in Chapel Hill,
where 7 people were evacuated because of the flooding in this apartment complex.
And what did you see once you got over there?
It was quite a scene here. This is a complex we are aware of that has had some flooding. It's off South Estes Drive. And so Vinny, who has covered flooding here before, knew to try to go around the back of the complex. We tried that, and when we got there, we could see the flooding. We actually started talking with an Uber Eats driver who was there trying to make a delivery.
And I still was not able to get to the customer. Unfortunately, the roads were just way too flooded. I drove my car in and half of my car was submerged.
We were in a big Chevy Traverse. He was in a sedan, and the three of us kind of agreed there was no way we could drive into the water. We did come across a Chapel Hill fire department employee who told us to head back around to South Estes Drive. So we got there, they had the road closed, but they let us down a little bit. And that's where we saw a couple of Chapel Hill fire trucks, some Chapel Hill police officers, and then this kind of striking South Orange Swift Water Rescue was there. They had a big life raft on the back of a pickup truck that they were ready to take into this condo complex if they needed. And then they also had a city bus there ready to evacuate residents. So seeing that city bus was the first clue that people were going to be evacuating out of this complex.
Wow, it really does sound like quite a scene that you guys came up on. So what were residents saying when you were able to talk to them?
Yeah, so the flooding was so bad Tuesday night that we were not able to get into the actual complex. We were catching people as they were evacuating and coming out of the complex. So we ran into this man and woman and we started talking to them. They said they actually didn't live there. They'd come to help his mother evacuate.
I feel terrible. I feel disappointed. I feel humiliated.
She had actually just moved here in October, and she was shocked about this flooding. She wasn't aware when she rented her unit that this was an issue here, and they had taken some pretty wild video of the inside of her unit. She was on the first floor, and she was getting water up to her knees in some spots. It was really striking because while it wasn't a super cold evening, once you get wet in floodwater, it feels pretty cold. And it was maybe about 60 degrees at this point. And she, her son, and her daughter-in-law, they all had their pants pulled up around their knees because they were so wet and that cold material on their calves is just really uncomfortable. So I think there was a lot of frustration on Tuesday night about the situation here.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. It turns out this isn't the first time these condos, Camelot Village, have flooded. So, Monica, what have you learned since you were out there on Tuesday about the history of flooding there?
Yeah, this is pretty interesting. This is an area of Chapel Hill that has dealt with this for quite some time. We have some people at WRAL who have been here for years, and the oldest video that we have found so far actually goes back to a flooding incident in the year 2000.
In the same situation in the same apartment complex. Then around this time in 2016, more flooding problems at that apartment complex.
So
wow.
24 years of flooding issues here. The residents that I've spoken with here are much newer to this area. I spoke with a gentleman who's been here for about 3 years renting, a woman who has owned for about 2 years. There was a major incident here last June, and one of the men I spoke with had actually been displaced for about 4 months. So he'd only been back in his unit for the last 3 months before this issue Tuesday night popped up again.
Knowing that it's probably going to flood again, let's prep. Boy Scout motto, always be prepared.
And what does the property management have to say about all this? I mean, if it's been going on for this long, is there nothing they can do to fix it?
They are definitely trying to get creative and do different options. This is an interesting community that is comprised of owners and renters. There is a homeowners association that's managed by Onyx Management. While this community has existed for decades, this management company has only been involved for the last couple of years. They tell me that they've been in lots of contact with Chapel Hill Stormwater, and they are also now working with a third-party civil engineer on what they can do here. It's striking when you drive into this complex. It's a beautiful area, a lot of really nice pine trees and flowers, but the creek here is completely flanked by sandbags, and you can tell just when you drive in on a nice day that flooding would be an issue here.
Some of the strategies that they've used of bringing sandbags, like that's just not working.
They're trying to get creative. It's particularly these ground floor units that have all of the issues. The Red Cross is here now trying to help people, and the property manager who we spoke with this morning, hours later, is still out here going unit to unit, trying to figure out what people need.
The residents here are absolutely resilient. They're lovely people. This is probably the last bastion of affordable housing in Orange County. And so I explained to the board, we have a moral imperative to help these people.
Does the complex say anything about how much information they give to people who are thinking about moving in?
Yeah, there's some information on the Camelot Village Homeowners Association website about this that encourages people to get renter's insurance. But I think something people may not realize is that renter's insurance, the base level of that, doesn't include flood insurance, which is obviously really important here. In terms of the history on the website, they have some information about that back in 2013, 72 of the 76 lower units had to be condemned because the flooding was so bad here. Luckily, this time around, all of the units right now are deemed habitable. Technically, they are not condemned or anything like that, but we've seen people ripping up the baseboards here today. So the damage is definitely extensive here today.
Right, and that's not to mention what I would imagine is people's personal belongings that were maybe got wet by this.
Oh, absolutely. I spoke with a woman who was really trying to stay on the bright side, but she told me all of her son's Christmas toys are destroyed. About 90% of her clothing is gone. And despite all of that, she said, this is a great community. She has great neighbors, and she wants to try to move back in when she can.
And we are expecting more severe weather coming on Friday. Our meteorologists have issued another WRAL weather alert day. So how are the complex and residents feeling about this cleanup process by the end of the work week?
I think there is definitely some anxiety here about that right now, that they could be dealing with this issue in just a couple of days again.
It's devastating to know that we have to constantly, the moment it starts raining, we have to be on alert.
This issue is really widespread. Of course, there's the problem of people having to pull up baseboards to make sure there isn't mold and stuff like that right now. But we've even seen a bobcat machine working in the parking lot. It's really muddy everywhere. There is a dumpster that was actually pushed halfway across the complex from where it was next to a recycling bin. So there is just a lot left to do here. And I think people are feeling pretty anxious about getting it done before, this could happen again, unfortunately.
Thank you for joining me today, Monica. I hope these folks are able to get it all figured out. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting in your inbox every morning with local news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.